Welcome back to the Buddy Ruski Show, a podcast about origin stories. My guest today is Jay Kutchma. Jay is a musician hailing from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where his knack for music began with the smooth sounds of the accordion. After high school, Jay took a hiatus from music. He earned a degree in biomedical engineering and eventually became a science teacher, and the only other place that would hire him besides his hometown. You guessed it, Durham Public Schools. I missed having Jay as a teacher at Brogden by 2 years. Jay really is an absolute legend. If you've been in Durham for a while, you probably know who he is, even if you've never met him before. His signature shoes are unmistakable. No, he's not a professional athlete. He just rocks the same kick-ass cowboy boots with Spurs on the back of them that clank wherever he goes. It's kind of his calling card. After he left teaching, Jay reconnected with his love for music following a brief run at being a screenwriter. This is where our stories cross over. Jay and my fabled roommate Tom Rao, a recurring character on this show, played in a band together in the early 2010s. I had the pleasure of seeing Jay perform on numerous occasions. We spent nights together talking about music, life, and of course, Durham. Since 2016, Jay has lived in Idaho, where he recently ran for political office. He said he was apathetic towards politics for most of his life, but the results of the 2016 election prompted him to become more involved. Don't let the long runtime scare you away from this episode. This conversation is worth every second. As always, follow Buddy Ruski on social and sign up to become a member at buddyruski.com. Without further ado, here's Jay Kutchma. Jay Kutchma, thanks so much for being on the Buddy Ruski Show today.
My pleasure.
I mentioned this to you a second ago, but you're a bit of a legend around here, not just for your fashionability, particularly the boots with the Spurs, which I think anybody who lived here, I guess, I don't know when it is that you moved, but there's an air of Durham that the clanking of the Spurs of Jay Kutchma are a sound that everyone recognizes. So it's a real pleasure and honor to be able to speak with you today.
Yeah,
I know that
you're my pleasure.
In and out of Durham these days. You're a man on the move, a man on a mission. So thanks so much.
It's actually right now, currently, it's not Spurs plural, it's plural singular.
Okay.
But it's a temporary thing. We just recently had to buy a new car, a new used car. And it's a stick, and we bought it 2 weeks before I made the drive from Idaho to North Carolina, and I've never driven a stick before. And my wife said, "I'll give you 2 weeks of lessons, and but then you're on your own. You got to find your way across the country." And she said, "I think by the time you get here, you'll be a real pro." And one of the first things I realized is you can't wear Spurs and drive a stick. You can drive one. You can use one Spur, but you can't have the other one. It is really obnoxious.
I'm assuming it's the foot that you're driving with, the brake and gas pedal one that can't have the Spur.
That one fine. It's the clutch.
Oh,
the clutch one, because it's so intensive on that foot they use, and it does interfere, especially if you're a nascent a stick driver. You can't. I mean, there's no way. At least for now, I can't have it on.
I've never had to drive stick, and I don't know that I'm not a big car person. I know a lot of classic cars use stick. I feel like a lot of sports cars use stick, but I'm hoping that it's a lesson that I never need.
It is a lot of fun. I do really like it. But it's a small Toyota Matrix hatchback, so it's not some big, sports car. But it can be a lot of fun. But for you and for your listeners, it's important. Don't forget, give space between you and the car in front of you. Not only because you can get hit from behind and driven into that person, but you never know if I may be in front of you ready to screw up. I've stalled out twice on the ride here to your place here.
Well, but you made it.
I made it.
That's
yes.
what counts. So you are not a Durham native. A lot of folks that I've talked to on my show are native to Durham, or at least native to the area. So tell the folks a little bit about where where you come from, how you got into music, and how we got to where we are now.
Sure. I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and my parents had my brother and I playing music. I think I started whenever I was 7.
Where's Johnstown? How close is that
central,
to like Philly
it's 2 hours east of Pittsburgh.
Of Pittsburgh, okay.
Yeah, and it's towards the central part of Pennsylvania, and it is southern central maybe, and it is a steel mill town, or former steel mill town by this time. My dad worked in the mills. I still have one guy that I grew up with. I was in a band with. He still works in the mill. Another guy that I grew up with does. My neighbor's son, I just saw this trip. He still works in the mill. So it's still going on there. It's not what it was, but there's still people working them up there. And I come from a Ukrainian and Eastern European family. So then I started playing accordion whenever I was 7. So whenever we would have family reunions, everybody would expect me to play the beer barrel polka or whatever.
Is that a family tradition? Was the accordion passed down to you from your parents and their parents? How did you get into the accordion?
They wanted me to be, cultured, but why the decision was the accordion rather than like say piano. There are ethnic groups that, like folk dancing ethnic groups, and we'd started doing that earlier whenever I was 5. If you've ever seen like the Nutcracker, and there's the Russian dancing part of it. Okay, well, that's kind of what I did whenever I was 5, and my brother was I think I was 6 and my brother was 5. And in playing that went along with the culture that, some of the people played instruments, and we could, give breaks for the dancers and play some tunes.
So did you continue to explore music outside of sort of what was expected of you from your family? Were you in band, or did your schools have music lessons and things like that?
Yes, and I played the saxophone, I think, starting in maybe 3rd grade. But I think it was the 4th grade, whenever I was maybe 8 or 9, that's the first time that the mills started to close in the 80s. And so there was, like, tighten up the belt, we can't do this anymore, these luxuries. And so I didn't play saxophone anymore, but I was still playing accordion. You got to get your priorities, and accordion always trumps the saxophone. And at the age of 13, that's whenever I got a guitar and my brother got a bass, and then that's whenever I started. I joined a band very soon after that. One of the guys, we were in a band together, a heavy metal band together, and he still works in the mill there.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Did you and your brother have play a lot together as well in bands?
In those folk bands, we did. But I don't. I mean, he is like it. This is out of anybody I've played with. I mean, he truly does have the best ear of anybody, and he played mandolin, and it was at some point he had gotten music lessons for several years. It was like 3 or 4 years. We went to the same instructor. It was an Italian guy in town and lived up the block from me, and Mr. Aveni was his name, and he led the senior citizens band, in his retirement ages. And he gave me accordion lessons, and then he would give my brother mandolin lessons afterwards. And after, it was like 3 years of giving my brother lessons, both of us looking at these music books, both of us playing family reunions off the same notation, and I had to concentrate very hard. Maybe it was because the accordion was, this bass treble relationship, but I could not take my eyes off of these pages. I couldn't, but there would be my brother playing, and he's staring at everybody off into space. And after about 3 years, the accordion, our teacher had to sit my parents down and say, I feel like I need to give you 3 years return on your son Travis's lessons. And they said, why? And he said, he can't read music. And she said, of course he does. I hear him play. And he said, he can play music just fine. He just can't read it. And she said, but he's looking at the page. He said, I know. He's never read any of this in his life. It's all been, he hears the tune. He said, it goes like this. And my brother just was able to do that. It's unbelievable. But so he played, mandolin into later years. And then with the bass, it was just something that, I don't know, he just never, he had it. He had one of those BC Rich Warlock-esque, they look like these demon basses or whatever. It was cool looking, but he never really joined a band with it or anything. Yeah, I don't know.
That's quite an eclectic mix of instruments. You got accordion, saxophone, acoustic guitar, bass guitar, mandolin. Are there any other instruments sprinkled in there? Did you ever get into drums or the bassoon? I don't know what.
I didn't, and I need to tell you. I mean, and this is not false modesty. I mean, this is true. I'm a good accordion player compared to people who can't play accordion. All right, I'm really good, but otherwise, I'm actually not very good. I never developed in this shredder way for some reason. I would practice. I would do my due diligence, but it never happened. And same thing with the guitar. I'm not a shredder at all. I mean, my guitar playing skills is somewhere between Frank Sinatra and Joe Strummer. And and Frank Sinatra never played guitar. So, it's not false modesty. I like doing it, but I always had to rely on, other people to really do the shredding. And even with other instruments, I could chord my way around, but if you give me an instrument, my wife will say, "My God, he picks up that violin," and listen to him play. Well, yeah, I mean, I can make some notes, but it's only impressive to people who can't do it.
You're a bit of a generalist.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
with instruments.
Story of my life. Yeah.
Is there something that the accordion is comparable to? How can you? Because I've seen the accordion both on TV and in person, and I know it has keys on it like a piano or a keyboard would,
yeah.
But I imagine that it doesn't quite translate. If you play the piano or play the keyboard, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to be able to pick up the accordion and just have at it.
That's true. In fact, to that point, growing up, I didn't have any. I think one part of it, playing any instruments or doing a sport or getting involved in anything. I think people see somebody else do it and they fall in love with whatever action that is and want to do it. But growing up, my idols were Weird Al Yankovic, and it's okay now, but back then, I mean, he was, he didn't become what he was, or what he became. He wasn't what he became, and there really wasn't anybody else. And, I would see every so often on Saturday Night Live, I saw once Billy Joel. He played a song and he played accordion. And I was excited because at least I think the promos had, "And this weekend, Billy Joel," and it had a Billy Joel playing accordion. I thought, "Oh, my mom, this is great. Billy Joel's playing accordion. I want to stay up and see Billy Joel." And it was such a disappointment because as he was playing, he was only playing the right hand. The piano hand, the bass hand, he wasn't playing at all. He was just using that to do to breathe in and out. And it was kind of a disappointment. I thought, oh, this guy is what a poser, But I like the instrument. It is on the inside of the piece is reeds that as you pull the accordion in and out, it's breathing air over those reeds. And if you hit one button, it opens up the reed so that air goes across it to make the sound. And the bass side, each button corresponds to maybe 2 reeds that open up to make a chord. So the bass side is your oompa oompa chord part, and then you have the melody treble part on the right hand side. If you can play piano, you can at least do what Billy Joel does on the accordion. Don't let that stop your dreams out there, folks.
Were you planning on being a musician, sort of coming through school when you graduated high school? You're like, this is what I want to do for sure, or were there other prospects for you? It sounds like being in the mills in Johnstown, where you were, was something that a lot of folks in the community did. So did you think maybe that was your destiny, sort of regardless of music? How were you measuring what path you were going to take?
working in the mills was not going to be a route that my parents were ever going to allow me to take. And so they were very encouraging me to go to college. They were also very encouraging me to not continue playing music because by that time I was very much wasn't playing the accordion anymore. I mean, it was rock and roll. It was not really. I mean, we were playing to a couple dozen people, sporadically every couple of months, and but it was fun. But they said, maybe this is something that you should forget about for a little while. Maybe someday you can lead the orchestra at the Senior Citizens Center. And speaking of which, I'll be there at 6 p.m. on Sunday. I'm kidding. But I had, I essentially stopped playing music for, I don't know, till I was in my early 20s again, I guess.
Wow. Yeah. That's hard to believe.
Yeah. And it was, I didn't play it really much at all. I remember a guy in our dorm had a guitar, and when he was gone, I remember sneaking back into his place and playing, and then quickly leaving before he came back. I was friends with his roommate, but other than that, I just kind of dropped it,
Where were you in school? Where'd you go to college?
Johnstown.
Okay.
So I went to Pittsburgh for about 2 years, and then I came back into town to Pitt, Johnstown.
Did they have any kind of music school or anything that would entice you or sort of draw you back in while you were there?
No, I don't think ever going to school for music was going to be something I would want to do. It was always at that time, it was always something that I think I did on the side for pleasure, for something else, some other, reason inside that I couldn't quite explain. I loved doing it, but it took me, some time to really say I have to be committed to this.
What were you studying instead of music?
Biomedical engineering in Pittsburgh at Duquesne for 2 years, and then I switched to secondary education in physics in University of Pittsburgh.
So you were going to teach?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I graduated, and I was still playing. I met some people in college that liked doing more, kind of punk rock shows. And we played, and it was fun. I mean, it was a blast. But then I got a job teaching physics in my high school hometown, and I did that for a year. And it was good. It was a great job. It was at a small Catholic school that I went to. The kids were great. It's a very tight community, though. You just happen to know everybody, and grown up with some of these kids' brothers or uncles, and it happened. There was one particular student who I really liked quite a bit. I still do. I still see him every so often, and he just was not blowing off my class, physics, and very bright guy, but I just wasn't teaching whatever to get to this person. And I had this conversation with him, and he just failed this test. I mean, miserably. And he said one time, I think it was him, that said that. I said, you need to step it up, man. I mean, I just can't. You earned yourself an F. That's it. Sometimes, I think you got other extenuating circumstances. I do the D minus, because you have to actually try to fail, and you are doing it. And he said, were you in a band one time? And I said, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, young man. You like playing guitar for a band with them. Sir, I object to where this is going. You need to take my class seriously. You wear like a gold lame shirt and pleather pants. A D minus it is, but never again.
I clearly was not doing enough digging on all my teachers in high school, because I could have used some of those grade bumps if I had only known that they were deep undercover. And
you needed to go to more underground rock show or rap shows or whatever it was growing up, and whatever the culture was here in Durham. God, that'd be hilarious. Yeah.
How long were you teaching?
There, I taught for a year, and it was rewarding. I mean, those kids were great, but and I remember thinking about this. I did want to move south because I wasn't Pennsylvania's winters at the time I was just over with. And I remember wanting to move to North Carolina because of climate. It was right in between like Pennsylvania and that, the edge of Florida that I think this is a place I think would be a perfect temperature.
Had you been down here much at all?
No, I don't think ever. But I had sent out applications along the East Coast, about 80 of them.
For teaching jobs?
For teaching jobs, yeah, when I graduated. And the only one that responded for me was my hometown. And everybody was very surprised. They said, with a physics degree, you should be able to go anywhere. And the only one that responded with an earnest offer was Durham Public Schools. And so I ended up moving down here, and I taught at Brogden. And I think I missed, like, some of these people that I ended up playing in bands with or going on tour with. I didn't realize, but I missed teaching them by maybe 1 or 2 years.
When were you there?
Weird. 97, maybe. 97 through 2000 or 2000. And I think I had quit teaching by 2001.
Dang. I think I might be one of those people.
Were you at Brogden?
I was at Brogden, yeah.
No way.
Yeah, so I graduated high school from Riverside in 2008. So now I'm trying to backtrack.
That's where they all went. They all went to Riverside.
I think actually I started at Brogden in 2001 because I remember being on family vacation when September 11th happened.
Wow.
And I know that for a lot of people, the way they remember September 11th in my age group is being picked up from school, like sort of learning something crazy is happening and then being picked up from school. And that wasn't for me because or wasn't the memory that I had because I was out at Wrightsville Beach with my family.
Gosh.
Yeah. That's wild. I didn't realize you were at Brogden.
97 through 2000, I think, yeah.
That's really cool. Well, thank you, Durham Public Schools, for bringing Jay down our way.
And I just saw the first person that I saw this trip was she's now a principal at the School of the Creative Arts off of Red Mill Road, Renee Price, and she was my co-teacher at Brogden.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started off together. I think her first year was my first year. We were on the same team together.
That's crazy. Yeah. She was a assistant principal, I think, by the time I got there, or maybe during the time that I was at Brogden, she became an assistant principal. But I remember her. I don't remember her as a teacher. I remember her being a assistant principal there. She was excellent. From the beginning. She really was great. And I was on a team with her, and it was Renee and I, Amber Klein, and Dorothy Lyons. And we all had like our own roles, within that team. But man, we were great. In fact, I remember they had us taking like a personality test or something, and they were trying to get us to. I vaguely remember this. Maybe it wasn't that particular team, but we were all, matched perfectly, to really do a lot of great work. And they gave us, we all had to make a drawing, all the four of us, and I remember they said, now, if your drawing turns out like this, and they showed an example, then it's because you have too much of this. But if you have this, then it's too much of this. And they said, but if this is what we're looking for, if this is the perfect team, and we drew that, it was really, really great. And Renee, or Principal Price to you, she was great back then. But she's been a principal now for 7 or 8 years up there. And from the moment she got in, I remember talking with her saying, how have you been? And she said, I'm this principal at this new school, and I absolutely love it. And she still has that. Whenever she's stopped in, she still has it. That love, or, it's great. Were you teaching science at Brogden?
Yes, 8th grade science, yeah.
Man, that's one of those sliding door moments. It'd be fun to, like, sort of put myself back in that era at Brogden. And, yeah, I definitely had friends that you most certainly taught, or older brothers of friends of mine that you definitely taught. So I'll have to do some investigating after this now, because I'm really curious about that. So did you quit when you were done at Brogden? Did you stop teaching altogether?
Yeah. I did for a couple of years. I floated around. I worked at UNC, just working, some pickup jobs for a while, and then I worked at the School of Pharmacy for about 4 years, and they did some restructuring with the department, and then I lost that job, and that's whenever I really started playing music semi-seriously. I mean, I just really dedicated myself to it. I was maybe in my early 30s then, I think.
What was the switch that flipped? Because you said that you had faded in and out of playing music, taking music seriously. So what was it at this moment in your life where you were like, maybe I want to revisit this as a career of sorts?
I had always had a tendency to do a lot of different things, never be great at anything. And maybe that is just, if you, in any field, I mean, if you're a business person, you probably go through that and try and figure out who you are, what you need, to be the best at. And I think that a lot of people have a frustration with that. And with the arts, it was, that was even worse. I mean, now it can all be bad. And when I would try writing screenplays, and because I worked in a theater with movie theater, and that I really started loving watching movies.
Where was this?
The Carolina Theater in Chapel Hill.
Okay.
And I blown off movies before until I took a course in college on, and I thought, this would be, Easy A or whatever or Easy B, who knew? But it was on a director named Sidney Lumet, and he did. And with every movie, I just got more involved, like loving, not this guy, just this guy, but just movies in general. He did Dog Day Afternoon, The Verdict, Murder on the Orient Express, Serpico. He was mostly known for, I think, his 70s heyday.
Okay.
And his people, nominated and won for, I think it's maybe, it's a significant number of Academy Awards his films have been nominated for, and he had never won, I don't think. They gave him an honorary Oscar, I think, just a few years ago, and then he had passed away since then. But his films blew me away, and I wanted to get involved with film. That's where I was on September 11th. I was in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival, and I was working on movies, and screenplays. But when that got frustrating, I went back to music, and I'd work on music. And when that got frustrating, I'd go back to writing screenplays, and really trying to find my way in here. But I'm just always left in the dark, And it wasn't until I worked on it really hard on a screenplay. I was taking classes at UNC on it. And I worked really hard on the screenplay and sent it to somebody in Hollywood, and it was a friend of a friend, and they just trashed it. And I was showing my wife the notes, and she said, she said, don't worry about it. Don't let one person's opinion affect you. And I said, no, it's fine. She said, I'm serious. Don't let it affect you. I said, it's not. And she said, really, just don't get upset about this. And I said, it's really not affecting me at all. And she said, well, I'm glad to hear that. And I said, because I'm done writing screenplays. And she said, oh, come on, you're overreacting. And I said, no. And she said, it's just one person's opinion. I said, no, that's not it. I've never asked anybody. It didn't happen until that moment. And I was maybe in my early 30s by this point. I was always looking for approval. Tell me how this is. Tell me how to do this. And I told her, I said, with screenplays, I would write these screenplays, and I'm asking you, what do you think? I'd ask all my friends. I was exhausted friends for them to tell me what I think, but I never asked anybody what they thought about my music. I just did it. And it was a moment where I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do, because I never asked anybody about it. It's what I do. And that helped me in that moment. But to be fair, there was a number of years to exercise that, that approval, where you really need somebody to tell you, hey, you're good. This is what you do. You're great, and then at some point, it just doesn't happen anymore. But back then, that was a real moment for me that I said, yeah, it always felt something I had to do, regardless of whether it was going to go anywhere or do anything with it. I still had to do it. And so that's maybe the moment that I said I have to get serious, or should get serious.
Did music feel more natural compared to, because you've been doing it all your life, compared to screenwriting? Was there a sense that you didn't need that approval because you're like, I got this, I've been doing this forever, I don't even have to worry about what people think because I already know how to maneuver through this world, versus screenplays. It's a new environment. It's a new skill set, seeking that validation that you maybe haven't had, or even the experience that you haven't had all these years. Was there something natural about music that you were able to latch on to?
It's with, at least with music, the gratification, happens fairly quickly. You can write and play a song and record it and have it out into the world. Now it's easier than ever, very, very quickly. That is true with taking a video and putting it out in the world. But if you really are concerned or want to participate in the art of film or cinema, you can't do it by yourself. You truly do have to rely on other people.
Sort of the industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you have to have, at least at the time, somebody to hold the boom mic, that will do that for you. And you have to have actors. It's theoretical that you could do it all by yourself, but it seemed to be a much more rewarding experience to have other people participate in it. And with music, you can do it by yourself. And I think, for better and for worse, that instant gratification of it. But it was also, it seemed to speak in a unique way for me. Whether it was unique to other people who would just say, oh, this just sounds like so-and-so, it mixed with so-and-so. But so what? That's what I grew up to be. It's still unique, even if it's just a combination of this. And
that's true for literally every art throughout history.
That's right, yeah. And I think that there were elements of it that as soon as I would write a song or wrote lyrics or whatever it might be, I thought, well, that really describes what I was trying to get across. Whereas with writing screenplays, it was like it's banging my head up against the wall. But honestly, I wasn't doing the kind of work that I really needed to do with screenplays, either. But were they coming from the same space? Like the themes that you're working on, both with music and with the screenplay writing, were you trying to convey the same messages or stories, and you just found that it was easier to convey those with music, or were you approaching those two art forms in completely different ways? I think different ways. Yeah, and I went about all of it. I mean, maybe both of them completely wrong. I mean, maybe that's the only thing that links them together is I now know that, where I came up with what I wanted to say, and then I wrote the thing to hammer it into place to try and say that. Well, that's not organic. That's you have to let that little fire, go where it's going to go. And as opposed to dousing it out and trying to lead it with gasoline towards this other thing. So I definitely was making that mistake at the time with both of them. But I don't think I was working with any necessarily messages, or some type of something I was trying to explore. The music, and at least the lyrics, didn't really have much to do with anything back then. They were what seemed to fit. And it was only, I think, after a couple years of staying with music that I started to craft it with something that I think I needed to say.
Who were your influences back then?
Let's see. In teenage years, it was definitely heavy metal. I mean, it was Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax and Slayer, and then it was a lot of alternative music. But it was, I don't know if, and I did like them. I like Jane's Addiction and the Chili Peppers. I liked, but I really loved Fugazi, and when I was about 18 or 19, it was Fugazi and Public Enemy were my two bands that I really loved. And then I just, I don't know, I kind of stopped listening to music, period, for a long time. Maybe from my early 20s when I started teaching, I wasn't going to many shows anymore. I still play, but I wasn't buying records or CDs or tapes at the time. I wasn't listening to much, and I kind of gave up on it, for a long time. And my wife, I can't remember when this was, what year it was, But my wife said to me, I'd given up on teaching and playing music for, anything serious. And then my wife said, "Oh God, we have to go to see this show." I said, "Yeah, I don't go to shows anymore." I have a friend in Durham who loved going to shows and would always try to take me, but I really did give up on it. And she said, "We have to go see this." And I said, "Come on, who is it?" And she said, "It's Bruce Springsteen." I said, "Oh, that old fart. Get out of here. I don't want to go see Bruce Springsteen. He's just some, whatever, like overpaid." I was very into a punk rock phase then. She, "Come on, please." I grew up listening to him, and I didn't grow up listening to him, but he was, he sold 15 million albums in the 80s, so he's just prevalent force like Madonna or Michael Jackson, as prevalent of a force. And I said, "No, I'm not going to go see him. How much are tickets?" And I said, "Fine, all right, we'll go. How much are tickets?" $65 at the time. This was exorbitant. Fine, we'll go. And I'll tell you, I couldn't believe it. This dude had 20 years on me, and he was performing like he was 10 years younger than me. It was unbelievable. And it was like post 9/11, and he was, really, really out there doing it. He had got his band back together, and they were, I didn't know any of these songs, but I wasn't singing like it. I knew every single word, even though I'm sure we were surrounded by people who said, "What is this guy?" And that was, that's all I listened to for like a year, maybe even longer. I just couldn't believe I missed it, and now I listen to it, I put it in perspective of what I needed back then. But, that was a really big influence on my writing at the time. And still is, to a certain extent. But who it is now, that's a little tougher to say. I have a lot of records, and I don't have anybody that I like their whole career. I only like little pieces of person's career.
That seems fair. I think that's because you're the way that music influences you changes over time. So, I think about a lot of hip hop artists whose albums I really appreciated, like a guy like Jay-Z. His early music's all about the hustle, sort of his coming of age. And then once he actually makes it and he's just rapping about being mega wealthy and going to art galleries all the time, it's like, well, I can't really relate to that as much. And so you find new artists to fit the moment in time that you're in. And so, I can totally understand how that changes. Where was he playing, Bruce Springsteen? Do you remember?
Greensboro. I think Greensboro Coliseum.
Yeah, I've been to, speaking of Jay-Z, the only time I've ever been there, I think, was to see his Blueprint 3 tour in like 2000, I guess it must have been 2010, something like that. So
if you want to have you have to have some time on your hands, and this works well if you try and do some walking every day or hit the gym or, get on the treadmill. This has been a very good exercise. At some point, I realized how long I've been doing this. You really do forget about time. And sometimes somebody will remind you when, your first album came out. You think, oh, my God, I've really been doing this for a chunk of time. I mean, it's not just this wasn't just a hobby. And it's strange for me to think, like, you think, well, of course, you've been saying that all along. No, it was, I've taken it seriously, but I've never really realized that I was going to be a lifer, at some point. And then as opposed to having influences like per album or that affect your art, you start to have influences on how to run your career. And I started listening to, like, say, George Jones. He's a guy that people really love. But at the time, I think, well, he's great. He's got a bunch of great hits, got a great voice. But how many albums did he put out? Can you really say somebody's great if they've put out 80 albums and 1,000 songs, and you only know like 12 of them, and all the other ones are crap? Not picking on George Jones. He's better batting average, I think, certainly better than that. But I started listening to people from the first album to the last, and you get to be a lot fairer, like evaluation, as opposed to just saying, well, this person is this, or that's what they've become. You can see, the years that they were really hitting it. And if you're interested and study that person's career, you can say, oh, well, that's whenever this was happening, and not that it's some A-B formula for it, but it gives you a better understanding of like what music or art can do for you as a creator, and that you're going to have times whenever you don't know what you're doing and it doesn't really make sense, but it gets you to this, like other people. You say, well, this is garbage, what they did, but it got them to this. So it's legitimate, that legitimizes that, because that's all it was. It was a stepping stone. And that doesn't always happen with albums. Sometimes it's other projects. But that's a very good. I'd be very interested. Have you ever tried doing something like that? Like with Jay-Z, listen from the first album, first note to where he is now, and to look at a person holistically.
Yeah, I will say I haven't done the full career arcs for folks, but I spent a lot of time last year during the early part of the pandemic, when I was spending a lot of time at home like most folks, and did go through a lot of full albums. That was a routine that I tried to get into, was like going back and listening to, just putting an album on start to finish, because it seems like there's it's a bit of a lost art these days that folks make albums. A lot because of streaming. It's really easy to just throw songs up. Either, I feel like a lot of albums now are just a collection of singles. It's not really cohesive in the way that it used to be. But I can't say that I've ever gone and listened to, because I think for me, especially being interested in hip hop, a lot of these guys are still making music. So they have their catalog just keeps growing. And, but there are definitely artists that I think would be interesting to explore that idea with. So I appreciate the homework assignment.
Yeah. That's what it's kind of felt like, is homework. Yeah. Well, I expect a report on Monday.
Were you, where else were you pulling inspiration from? It sounds like you weren't listening to a whole lot of music to draw stuff in for your songwriting, and so where else were you finding that you were absorbing influences or inspiration for what you were creating?
I don't know. I think a lot by that time, whenever we were with the band Red Collar and we were playing, it was kind of the same situation with everybody in the band, that we were at the age, and that seems to be fairly common, that people past the age of, say, 28, they either have kids or got into a profession where music. And I think there was an article about this, something that no matter what generation you are, that music that you hear from the ages of 23 to 27 will always be the best. And you'll argue to the day you die with other people who are completely generation about why that music, is. And for whatever, you move on with family or career, who knows? And we were all past that age, and we weren't really listening, listening actively to too much that was coming out. And I don't know. I think by that time we were practicing pretty heavily, that I don't think we were really interested in listening to anything else. It was just what we were doing.
Is Red Collar the first band that you had here in Durham?
Yeah. There was a label that was really good that Mike liked, called French Kiss Records, and oddly enough, he said he felt really like this label because he said every band from it were incredible live. And he said they were, rock bands, arty rock bands. And he said, but it's a really good label. And Mike's playing really is like, of that. And I think mine certainly is like more Bruce Springsteen, just, and that combination ended up working out really well for us. But oddly enough, we were at the time, I can't remember what year this was, but we were heading to Austin to play South by Southwest, I think, for the first time. And Mike was we were trying to figure out things to do on a budget. And Mike had said, "Oh, this label, French Kiss, is having a showcase. Maybe I can like get us tickets, to go see it or something." And Mike took the initiative to write to the guy at the label. It was a small label, I think, out of New York City maybe, and said, like, "Hey, we're this band out of Durham, North Carolina. I really love your label. Or we're playing South by Southwest. If we were on a budget, but if there's any way you can maybe get us into the show or whatever, we'd really appreciate it." And he said, he came in, he said, "The guy wrote back, but it's this really weird request." He said, "You need to," he said, "Yeah, you can, but, do you know where this is?" And he used some building. He said, "Yeah, I know where that is." And he said, I'd go in there and it was a ridiculous request. Like, pull your pants down, smack your ass, and, or something, some weird, strange, bizarre demonstration he had to do. And so they go to this address, and it's right by Durham Central Park. And Mike walked in, and as soon as he walked in, he knew why the guy sent him there. Because oddly enough, the guy that owned, it was an art gallery, and the guy that owned that art gallery was the drummer for a band that was on French Kiss Records. And Mike had no idea. I think Mike worked in the at Land, or I don't know where he worked at the time, but I think he might have even served this guy and had no idea that he was in this band that he loved from however hundreds of miles away. So that, I think that, well, that is that label was definitely, I think, an influence on Mike, which absolutely became an influence on us.
Where were you all playing back then? Because I know, at least for me, the way that I think about downtown, sort of around like 2010,
yeah,
you start to see some smaller venues pop up, Pinhook, Motorco, I guess Casbah, which has changed hands seemingly every other week over on Main Street. Cat's Cradle's been a mainstay for a long time. There are obviously bands or venues in Raleigh and other places. But where in Durham were you all playing shows?
Ringside. It was definitely a place that we played, 305 South. Let's see, the Marvell Event Center. Do you remember that place?
I don't. And Ringside is another one that I've heard mentioned so many times, and I think both are right before my era.
That was great. I mean, that was a great place. It was on the first floor was. It seemed like, I don't know, there would be like dancing on, one floor. The second floor was a bar. The third floor was the place where bands would play. And then the fourth floor was another bar. But it was rickety, and it had so much personality. I mean, it just was really, it wasn't, put some fertilizer on and all of a sudden it's got personality. I mean, it was truly, like, it seemed years and maybe decades worth of living,
Where
and
was
breathing. The address, let's see, it is now, I don't know the address or even to define what it's across from now.
Was it downtown?
Yeah, it was downtown. Let me think. If you stepped out, what were you looking at? Maybe like the main, I think, is it that Main Street where it's teasers below, okay, but on the inside, like that, it just looks like a storefront with nothing.
Yeah,
I think it might have been in that area across the street, and it is now. I just saw it today or yesterday, but it looks like a real estate place now.
Yeah, okay, I know that building. Yeah,
somebody bought it, and then it was an art gallery for somebody for a while. This guy's own personal art, I think. But I don't know at what point it became a real estate place. That was great. Marvell wasn't too far away from that. And we played Joe and Joe's. And that was maybe like the most fun. That was a lot of fun. And that is Bull McCabe's now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Joe and Joe's was a venue, or was it similar to what Bull McCabe's is like this hybrid bar, outdoor patio thing?
Yeah, if you walk into Bull McCabe's, I think there's maybe two sets of doors to enter, and then there is that median partition in the middle. Off to the left was the bar, and off to the right was a dining area. And Joanne, I don't know why she did this or who asked first, but people just would play there. I mean, they would bring in their own PA or something, and she very kindly would let people do that. And then it was just the place she went to play, and she would always say, yes, it's okay to play. And I think it would ended up being I don't know if I would really want to deal with that, that element. And that, it was a really, really a lot of fun, because there wasn't much to do in Durham. Somebody told me this fact about 10 years ago, I think it was, and we were talking about Durham. And this is many years remembering something, and I hope I'm not doing it too wrongly, but within the actual city lines of Durham proper, of downtown, this person asked me, how many people do you think live downtown in the city lines? And I said, I don't know, a couple thousand or whatever. He said 200. It was nothing, And at the time, there wasn't anything to do, and really much to do downtown. And it was like a lot of weirdos that lived in Durham that were looking for something to do, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I don't think I appreciated it at the time. I just assumed, well, this happens everywhere, but it wasn't. It was a lot of strange bands, but it was always great to see them. They sounded nothing like us at all, but would be on a bill together, and it was fun.
Yeah, it does seem like the camaraderie of the people in that era of Durham, like you said, because there was nothing, everyone was kind of makeshifting everything.
Yes.
Like you said with Joe and Joe's, it was just became over time this place that people played because people needed a place to play. And I'm sure, there were the few restaurants that did exist back then became, I know James Joyce and the Fed are like hallmarks of that time, because they were one of the only places that existed and that served food. And so tell me a little bit more about that, sort of who else maybe was on the scene then, what other bands were playing, just like what that time was like when you did only have a couple places to go. Because now people think about Durham and they think about this this downtown area that's just like bursting at the seams with stuff to do, places to eat, places to drink, places to go see shows, do whatever, have offices, all that kind of stuff. But that is not the Durham that existed only a few years ago.
Yeah. And I think that there was maybe the difference between them then and now. And this isn't just Durham. This may be, America in general. But I think you can lose money on shows back then, and it wasn't as big of a deal. And you could do it for like a long period of time. Or you can do it until you're waiting for something to hit, until it just kind of catches. And you think, oh, this will work. We can work with something like this. But back then it was a lot of unused space. And I think at least with Ringside, the guy we would ask if we could play, and he'd kind of shrug and say, yeah, if you bring a PA, sure. And if he had somebody that night or didn't have somebody that night, it didn't really affect his bottom line. I think he owned the building. I have no idea, but my suspicion is that he was, or if he didn't, the rent was fairly low because nothing was going on. And so you could take a lot of chances or let people take chances. And when you're allowed, whenever you can find a place to do that, or when you're allowed to do that, then some really nice things can happen. But the moment you're not allowed to take chances, and it has to fit into something, whether it's expectation for money, then the risk taking becomes a lot lowered. And at the time, it's funny. Whenever living in Pennsylvania, I remember I've only very rarely played covers. I was always in original bands, and occasionally we would throw in a cover because it was fun, or something. But don't think I was ever in a cover band that would play for an extended period of time. We mostly did original music. And in my town in Johnstown, I remember if we wanted to do a show, we had to rent a VFW post or some hall, some school hall or something, and we'd have to bring our own PA. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I can't wait to get to a place where, I don't have to lug around a PA system and, I can just walk in like a conquering king, and then I think I went to Pittsburgh and I saw bands that's what they had to just, if you were playing your own music, you had to play where you could. There was definitely venues there. But I remember coming to Durham and thinking how funny it was. Here I found this place where I thought, oh, it's going to be so much different. In Durham, it wasn't. You still had to, if people were great, allow you to play in their place, you still had to bring your own PA system. And that was like years, of trying to do that. And I didn't, it was always a real pain for me to do. I thought I'm not having any fun and I could set up this PA. I'm sweating to death before I would play the first note. But it was such a unique experience, to bring to people. And playing on those stages with different bands like Cantwell Gomez and Jordan, they were really unique. I mean, they not unique in like, oh, they're doing it. They were truly, I think, at least with us, or not with us, you could say, well, there's Springsteen, influenced, this thing. But Cantwell Gomez and Jordan, it always seemed to me that they were truly doing what they found to be, their own, not because it was built on something else. And Hammering More the Fingers, they were playing around that time too. Let's see, there was another band. It was a 2-piece, All Your Sciences. And I think that Dave, the drummer for that, if I remember correctly, didn't own a car. He would only get around on bicycle.
I love that.
Yeah. I think he worked at Duke, doing something. And he was a scientist doing something. I can't remember what Dave did. But so he would only bring enough drums that he could fit on his back on the bicycle.
That's commitment.
Yeah, I think that's what he did. Yeah.
I need to interview. I'm on the board at Bike Durham now, and bike commute everywhere. And I would love to talk to. You said his name is Dave.
I think Dave.
I'll start doing some digging.
Dave Z. Zelensky, maybe. No. Pardon me, Dave, if you're listening to this. Dave Z.
Okay.
But yeah, him and then there was a band called Beloved Binge, and they were a 2-piece. They moved here from Seattle, and they were so themselves. I mean, the way that they dressed was they fit in really well with, I thought, like 305 South. It was its own whatever. This is just us. It was such a, I don't know, like, I hate to use the word unique over again, but they brought a lot of personality to it, and they didn't live too far away from here, and we would play on shows with them, but we sounded, again, nothing like them. The band, the Dry Heathens, they were more like replacements to our Springsteen, I guess. But all of those bands, it didn't really make too much musical sense. You couldn't say that there was anything that they're like a musical commonality to them. But until Wilmington had this festival called the We Fest, and it was similar to, I guess, Durham's Troika, or just some downtown musical festival. And Rob and Elaney from Beloved Binge, we had like a Durham showcase where I think maybe 5 or 6 of us played, and it was incredible. I mean, the energy was like fantastic. From the first note, we played in I think the basement of the Soapbox maybe at the time, but I can't remember. But from the beginning, it really felt nothing musically made sense, but in maybe not even in attitude, but in something else, some really intangible thing. It was what a wonderful weekend. But you had to be allowed a couple years of freedom to be creative and to take chances and for nobody to care, whether or not they made money at it. That was really crucial. And that's, I don't know if that's still there in Durham, because I just haven't been here and investigated it. It might be, but I'm also, middle-aged, so why would they be letting me know? You're hoping that 20-somethings are out there doing the same thing, but, I don't know if it is.
You said risk-taking earlier, and I think that's something that is probably lacking because there is the stakes are higher now. There's more money in town, which means that rents are higher, which means that folks really are more conscious of their bottom line. And I wonder what that does to stifle artistic creativity, or even just outside of the art itself, the kind of moments I always think about sort of early Motorco, in that area, the kinds of overlap that you would see, the folks that you would see there and that you would run into, and the stuff, the ideas that would come from that, or the types of things that would just, from those collisions that would be birthed out of those moments. And I wonder if that happens nearly as much now, because everything downtown feels a little more transactional, I guess. There's just folks that are going to places to do the thing at the place, but there doesn't seem to be as much just hanging out, at least granted the pandemic has certainly restricted a lot of that in the last year and a half, but yeah, it does seem like, again, from that era, that there is this almost like there should be a yearbook that you could flip through and be like, okay, this person owned this bar, and they were also in this band, and they helped create these three things, and these people sort of like became their disciples and went on to do X, Y, Z. And I just really appreciate that more and more, I think, as I get older, and also as Durham has changed, that I was able to see that almost, I don't want to say changing of the guard, because a lot of those folks are still here, but to be a young person and to witness, folks like you. I have very fond memories of you coming to our house when we lived over on Anderson Street, and Tom, who's been my roommate for 8 years now and counting. You all playing in the band together, and you coming and practicing there, and just feeling like that was a really special time and like a special experience that I got to be witness to. And I do wonder if that is still able to happen, just because, I don't know, people are being pushed out. There's just not as much space available, as you mentioned. People were just taking advantage of random space that existed that no one had really claimed yet, and now there just is less and less of that. And I wonder what that does to a scene over time, and how it maybe starts to unravel what makes an area special.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm not sure. There was all the buildings that we played in. Then at Ringside, at some point the stairs creaked. You truly weren't sure if it was structurally sound. But that was what was kind of great about it, And with Joe and Joe's, there wasn't like a stage or a set PA, and you just kind of played on the floor. And there was another place that was Mr. Shoe, that nothing was going on, and I think that they would open up the doors every so often for maybe a festival and that. But you need, if you came in, you have to make sure you had an EpiPen because the mold was so bad. Once an area starts to get kind of clean and sterile, that's how it starts to feel. It starts to feel sterile, and then it does lose something. It always seemed to thrive a little bit better when it might just fall apart. And now that a lot of money has come into, this doesn't make the case to have hundreds of people in a structurally unsound place, but that was definitely part of the attraction, of being able to do it. And I don't know maybe it is possible. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's why, the kind of maybe certain types of music thrive in other areas. Music that is a little bit more undefined and exploratory needs to be happened in places that are undefined and more exploratory, and music that's not shaky, has to take place in places that are shaky. But then you have music, and this isn't anything against, like, dance music or whatever, but, it is kind of, it's a beat that's pretty standard, it's not going to go out that for at least 2 minutes, or so. And then it speeds up or slow down, but, but it is more electronic based. There are defined, loops, with it. And because you're hoping to get a bunch of people dancing, as opposed to, just a bunch of bored people sitting around, like, whatever. It's just different.
Yeah.
And it's not one way's better and one way's the other, but maybe that does suit. You don't have to be in maybe, that would have been terrible, having as actually like a couple dozen people dancing in this place, on the second or third floor would have been terrible, The place might have collapsed. In fact, that did happen at Broad Street Cafe with us one time. We did break the stage, unfortunately. That place was a lot of fun. Man, I forgot about that Broad Street Cafe. And before that, it was, it had a thrift store on the other side. And that was very encouraging to the, a lot of the LGBTQ community. There was bands that I saw, absolute shredders that were on that stage. They were these incredible bands I never heard of before, never saw since, but they were really something else. They were good about programming that place.
I worked the door there for a summer at Broad Street Cafe. My dad knew, because we lived pretty close, like a couple blocks away over there in Watts Illendale, and I think my dad knew the owner somehow, and so yeah, I got a job working the door, and I think I got paid, like, it was actually pretty good money. It was like $20 an hour, but I was only there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. But yeah, it's another one of those sort of forgotten, because that's another place that's changed hands a few times now since it was Broad Street Cafe. I don't know what it's called now, but I do want to ask you about the Spurs, the boots in the Spurs, mm-hmm. because that is I think there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of folks from this era of Durham that we're talking about, where even if they don't know your name, if I, with the Spurs, they were like, oh yeah, I know, I recognize that guy, right? I remember him. So I'm curious where that part of your sort of fashion sense, but also really part of your identity, how that came to be.
It was very quickly. Well, not very quickly. After Red Collar's first or second show, and we were still are a very active band on stage, and I remember getting my feet like pounced on by Mike or my wife, or who, she plays in the band too, my wife, and we really do dance on stage and jump up and down, and I remember wearing a pair of like All-Stars or something, 1-stars. And I thought, this is not going to do. And so I got the boots to just give a little bit better, protection. And the first time that we played Texas, I told my wife, it'd be hilarious if I went down there wearing Spurs. And she said, don't do that. And I said, I'm going to get a pair of Spurs. And I went to the Northgate Mall, and there was a guy that he repaired boots, and I walked in there, and he came out, and he had a big mustache and glasses, and he was wearing an apron, and he stopped his boots, he slowly turned his head, saw that I was in there, he slowly stood up and started walking towards me across the counter, and he said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm looking for a pair of Spurs. And he said, well, they're right over there, and he points to the other end of the counter. And he slowly walks over to the other point of the counter, and he put these pair of Spurs on the counter. And I said, that sounds great. I'll take them. And he says, well, that'll be $12.50 or whatever they were. I don't know what they were. I said, hey, do you happen to have like one of those little sheriff badges too? And he looked at me and said, no, and I don't got the little toy gun to go along with it either. So I bought the Spurs and I put them on, and and it was awkward. And we played Texas, and the first time I went on stage, like I normally I could pound my feet, in time to the music, and we were on a great wooden stage. And as soon as I did that, it made like this clunk chang that I thought, this is great, and it stuck, but it didn't look quite right. It just didn't look. It just didn't look right. I don't know how else to explain it. I had to work a bungee cord onto it to make sure these, it had to be functional, but it had to stay on some way. So I had to rig up my own little apparatus, but they still didn't look right. And I remember seeing Dreamgirls. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm watching Dreamgirls, and Eddie Murphy's in it, and he plays like this James Brown Elvis character. He's at the top of his game, but his manager, I think, is screwing him out of some money or something. I can't remember the plot. And he comes into his manager's office, and he's wearing this gold outfit, and he starts yelling at his manager, saying, "I'm the boss now. I'm the boss now. You're not going to take money from me. I'm the boss now." Something like this, okay? And he puts his feet on his manager's desk, and he's got gold shoes. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, "That's what I got to do." And I started painting them gold ever since.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of those things that we'd be sitting at the Federal or at Motorco or somewhere down. I mean, really, those were like the only two places that people hung out back then. And off in the distance, we could hear ching, ching,
Yeah.
and it'd get louder and louder. And it always just felt like, okay, yeah, like if Jay's here, like this is going to be a good night.
Great.
And so it's, I wonder if, because again, the community was so close back then, and, there'd only be 10 people at the bar maybe,
Right.
And it was all musicians and artists and a couple other folks hanging out. And so you got to know everyone there. Anytime you were hanging out at one of those places, it was like, the bar and Cheers, everyone was familiar. And now, I start to think about if I were, because I try to express myself a little bit through my fashion choices, and it seems more like people look, they almost see you as like a character and not a person that they would be interested in. They'll want to take your picture and put it on social media, but they don't really have any interest in who you are. And they're like, oh, I'm in Durham this weekend. Look at all these like interesting people. It almost feels like a zoo in some ways. And I don't know if I hope that you didn't ever get that, but I could imagine that might be a undesired side effect of having this like calling card that everyone can't miss. But yeah, I think it was like such a cool, it was one of those things that I remember noting early on about coming into downtown Durham and meeting all these interesting people that did really cool things. And for me, I grew up here, but Durham, like you said, there was no one downtown. And the coolest thing that we did in high school was hang out in the Cookout parking lot on Hillsborough Road at, whatever hour of the night. And so I wasn't really surrounded by this fascinating creative community until I started working with Aaron Mandel at Clarion Content, and then eventually with Gabe at Runaway with the clothing company. And there was like, oh, okay, people are really like themselves here. I don't feel like anyone's not themselves.
That's good.
Yeah, when I hang out at a Dirty Durham show or go to see Shirlette play or anything like that, and I really held on to that, and you were certainly a part of that, and so I want to pay my respects to.
That's a great That's a really great point. I mean, it really felt like people could be, themselves and their, own. That's a really good point with it. I think that another place that was, but there's two, and they're, I think related in some way, but with Chaz's record store, I think coming into town, and whenever you mention, Shirlette, too, I guess I'm only speaking from like the rock, part of the spectrum. I don't know what was going on in the hip hop, culture at the time. But with Bull City headquarters, that was another really special place that was not just music. They really set up a place similar to 305 South that was going to be a dedicated, art space. The part that I've struggled with in hindsight is how much are you, it seems that this, not just with what has happened with Durham, but in America in general, it seems to follow a pattern where it's destitute, or, desolate, or rather a desolate area that, you come in where the arts, has a little bit of gritty stance, and all of a sudden you've made it like a safe, for white people to come back into. And I have definitely like thought about, this is great to romanticize about, but another part of me thinks, oh my God, I remember thinking that with Troika Music Festival, it's last year. I remember thinking it's over for no reason. I mean, there was nothing that really told me that, but I remember walking away thinking, oh man, I think it's gone. And not, the coolness or anything, but whatever we had for that short period of time, it's gone. And maybe something better came to, replace it. I don't know. I think that I am wondering how to do this and how to retain it in a really great, healthy way. Because the moment people do start coming around taking pictures, it does become a zoo. It becomes a destination for, oh my God, this is what we did this weekend. And that's all you are. It's just like some weekend tourist spot, as opposed to being like a real and true part of your life that meant a lot, to my growth between who I was and who I am now. I mean, it was so important for that. And I do think, maybe as a teacher, that aspect of, well, how can you do that it's not eventually just going to get bought up and overrun? I don't know the answer about that, but whenever I find the answer, I'm not telling anybody. I'll tell you, but I'm not going to do it online.
I appreciate that. So you no longer call Durham your permanent residence. I won't. You can decide whether or not you call it home, but it's not your place of residence at the moment. When did you take off from Durham?
2016.
Okay, yeah, pivotal year in Durham's history and American history.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
I guess for everybody in some way, big and small, it changed things.
Yeah.
So you hit the road away from Durham. I know that you are still playing music, but you also started to get more involved, interestingly enough, in your local communities where you were bouncing around, and even ran for office.
Yeah.
Was this in Idaho,
yes,
where you are now?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you were maybe taking your experience here in Durham and not necessarily bringing it to these other places, but sort of understanding what it means to build community from the ground up and connect with people on a real level, and, porting that to the places you were going?
I live in Idaho now. It's, in Durham, I've always had bad allergies in my life. And, whenever I would go on the road and tour, I felt better in certain areas. And my bandmates, some of them would feel worse in those areas, but I felt better. And Idaho seems to be pretty good for my, physiology. And so we landed there, and in 2016, I'd never been involved politically, ever. I had political thoughts, if there was a war, sure, I signed a petition. Okay, but that's kind of it. I maybe went to a demonstration or two, but pretty small stuff. And then in 2016 and 2015, when the politics was, really starting to heat up, and then in 2016, whenever it came time for it was decided that the two candidates were who they were going to be. I thought I didn't like either of them. However anybody else feels about it, sure, whatever. I'm not going to, I'm not here to demonize any of that, but at least for me, I didn't connect with either of them. But based on my personal political involvement, a lifetime of dedicating 1 hour every 4 years to vote, which is nothing. These are the candidates I personally deserve. Just me. Maybe not you or anybody else out there. You may be really politically involved, and if you put in a lot of work and this is what you ended up with and you didn't like them either, it's a shame. But at least for me, these are the candidates I personally deserved. And when, we had a president elected, it wasn't the president, I was hoping for. But based on my personal political involvement, 1 hour every 4 years. At the time, I was 40 something years old. So you're talking about like I don't know, maybe a total of 6 hours of a lifetime dedicated to this gift of democracy. That's all I dedicated, and well, you get what you pay for, buddy. Whether in time or resources, whatever. And so I wanted to really desperately wanted to change that. And I didn't know what political party I was. I grew up in a Democrat family, Union Democrats of Pennsylvania. In North Carolina, it's Democrat, liberal Democrat. But at that point, I didn't know anymore. And so I did my due diligence. I read through the platforms of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And the one that, that percentage-wise that I agreed with more was the Democratic platform. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go to Democratic meetings. And I went once a month, and they were, it was a very, very small group. I mean, Idaho is a very red state. And my county meetings, there was only maybe like 10 people, at the county meeting. And they asked me, what I was doing there, and I said, well, a friend of mine said, if you want to get involved politically and you want to have the most bang for your buck, there's lots of things you can do. Okay, you can help a candidate, or somebody you feel about, but if you are a party person, if you feel a commitment to this party for whatever reason, the best thing for you to do is to become or assist a precinct captain. And whether or not you know this or not, but it's worthy to explain. You have, the country is divided into states. Every state is divided into counties. Every county is divided into districts. And every district is divided into precincts. And in those precincts, it's about, let me think how it is, between 2,000 and 3,000 people, I think, usually. And it's your job as like the party. You're the closest outreach person to the voters from your party. So you go knock on doors and to tell them who the candidates are. And that's what I did. I became a precinct captain. And I went and knocked on Democrats' doors, and there's not a lot. I mean, if in my county, or in my district, I think there's maybe 20 some odd thousand voters, and there's only 2,000 registered Democrats. So it's 10% or so. But I would go door to door and tell them who our candidates are. And I started seeing that for certain offices, we didn't have a candidate at all. And it was my job to try and recruit people to come to the party. But if there's nobody to vote for, what am I doing out here? And I saw that the state representative from my district, he won, I think, in 2006. And he was in office for 14 years. And in 14 years, he's only had 2 Democratic challengers in the general election. In 14 years, he only had 1 Republican challenger in the primaries. And so I put my name in because I just couldn't believe it. And I never thought about it. It's not some problem with Idaho or my district or this, even personally with this guy. But it's an American problem, I believe, 21st century American problem, where people just don't think about it. and they're not involved at all. And so, yeah, I put my name in, and at first it was, kind of a joke, not a joke. I was very serious about it, but I didn't know how seriously I was going to take campaigning. And I got a list of voters in my district. This is starting last year in March. So from maybe March to October, I called as many of them as I could. I called, and I tried to spread it out. I called 2,000 Democrats, all of them, and at least made the attempt to call. Some of them did, most of them didn't answer. Some of them, it was bad numbers or whatever, but I would always make my pitch, asking, what are your concerns? I wouldn't say, I need your vote. I just said, what are your concerns? And they would tell me what they were most concerned about. I'd write them down. And once I finished up with 2,000 Democrats, I called 2,000 independents and did the same thing. And then I did 2,000 Republicans. And I didn't win, but...
What do you remember what the breakdown was
with
the votes for
it was ish. I think I got 6,700 votes. He got 13,000. But I got 67. So it's 30 some odd %. But it's most important. This is the most important thing that I got out of it, that I feel that I did for my district. I gave voice to 6,700 people who didn't have one. But psychologically, this is the most important. You or anybody, can do. Just putting your name into making sure there's an opponent there. After every election, if you see the winner and they went unopposed, they get so many votes. And then right next to it is the percentage of the votes. Well, at least 12 of the years or 6 of the elections, he had 100% of the vote. So what it looks like is 100% of the people that voted for this guy. But that's inaccurate. Psychologically, you start to think, oh my God, 100% of the people like this guy. I don't like this guy or this woman, or this at all. Psychologically, you start to believe that it's 100% of the people love this guy and will give him his vote hell or high water. But it's not true. And that's, at least, if you can, do that, you start to at least psychologically, give voice and think that it's not this, red versus blue, black and white, decision. There's a lot in between. So I think that was maybe the most important thing that came out of it.
That's really cool, especially to have been sort of politically uninterested for so long, to have this enlightenment or awakening and to see a real opportunity to get involved, to make a difference. I think that since 2016 has been the case for a lot of different folks. They felt like they never, party politics aside, they maybe never felt like things were going to get so bad for them that it would rock the boat or cause this much chaos in their life. And 2016 was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And so you started to see more and more folks getting involved in politics in many different ways, running for office, getting involved in their party or whatever. But I'm sure that's an experience that, one, not a lot of people can say they have. And two, I'm sure it allows you to become ingratiated or like a part of your community in a way that even though you are a recent transplant, people feel like you really give a shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, it's not like sometimes political involvement. I mean, at least in Idaho, and there's this is not picking on Idaho, but it's this country has gravitated to polar opposite ends of the political spectrum and left a lot of people in between. And political parties have left people very disappointed, and the Democratic Party is no different. At least in Idaho, I think it's our county is about 250,000 people. And the number of Democrats that keep the party wheels moving there's 10 of us. That's it. And I don't think people realize, and and it's not fun. I mean, as you can imagine, like we create our own fun. Okay. But for me to say it's a blast, I can't believe it, because you have to wear so many hats. I'm wearing so many hats there, and you start to feel like you're ineffective, and it could really wear you down, but you're just doing it in hopes that other people show up. And, people say, I'm not a political guy. I don't know what I do. Well, somebody's got to show up to the office, before the county meeting once a month to unlock the door, turn on the lights, and make sure the thermostat is set at a comfortable thing. And if that's all you do for your political party, thumbs up, man. You're doing mostly what I've ever done in my entire life. So what that does, if you just fulfill that role, well, that means your precinct captain comes in a room that's not dark. There's light there, and it's a comfortable temperature. And the second person through the door, they didn't have to turn on the light or get it to a comfortable temperature. They set out the cookies. The fourth person puts out the water. They bring the water or something. And I think that is, if there's anything that's largely been lost, is this, a sense of belonging, to it. It's a sense that the political party doesn't speak for you. But there is, in America, that we all served some purpose or role. No matter how small, you felt a part of something, that you were part of this big ship that was going in some direction. And I don't think that, people feel like that anymore. It's a shame, and it's tough to convince people that you can't believe what that, just the analogy, come in and turn on the light. That's all. That's all you got to do. I know I'd be happy. I'd be ecstatic whenever I walk into that room and there's more than 10 people there. Like, oh man, we're really doing something here. You're the 11th person. Tell me your life history, whatever. Are we, really, moving the dial? I don't know, but I think that another part that's been lost is we do expect change to happen quickly. Flat out doesn't. It happens very, very slowly, especially in democracy. And if you can get past that, but it's very tough in a culture where you push a button or have it your way. It's fast and cheap. It's very tough to convince people to say this is worth your time. You're not wasting it.
Do you think that you will? It sounds like you're still very much involved in your in the political process where you live. Do you think you will run for public office again at any point?
I think so. If I am in Idaho at the time, and when you have to submit your name, my name will be on the ballot if nobody else's is. But if the day after, I don't know what the day is, April 2nd is the deadline. If April 3rd I wake up and I see that there's another Democratic candidate, I'll drop out. It's so important to just make sure there's a name there. And I don't know as a state representative if how effective I'll be. I'm not really sure. It was great making phone calls. There were points where I thought, man, I could really do this. But as sometimes as I'm sure we all know, sometimes people make great candidates and not actual good people in office. And so I'm wondering, you find your role, and you have to be willing to fail. If I would have gotten in office, the chances were very, very slim, if existent whatsoever. But you have to be willing to fail and to say, well, if I would have won the election, I'm willing to say, well, I tried, and I may have failed at it, but I'm not. You could step away and say, well, maybe something else, or maybe I'm just somebody that makes phone calls or plays shows for people that are running for office. I have no idea, but it's better than what I've ever done.
So it sounds like music is still very much a part of your day-to-day. Are you working on any new projects right now? Yeah.
I met kind of fascinating. This is fascinating to me, but I don't know if do you know this? I went out to Idaho, and wondering if it was a mistake or not. It's very far. You have to drive quite a distance to get to any major city that's not in Idaho. I think it's 5.5 hours to Salt Lake City. It's 6 hours to Portland. It's 7 hours to Seattle. So to play any market, I mean, you really have to haul it. So I was wondering if it was a mistake, but I'm feeling better, allergy-wise. One day, do you know this story? Have I told you this story? One day,
Maybe.
my wife, I said it was about to rain, and it was February, and it gets dark early because it's close to the 45th parallel. It's pretty far north. And I told my wife, I really need to get the dog to the dog park. And she said, oh, don't do it today. It's about to rain. It's about to get dark. And I said, she's going crazy. So she said, all right. I take the dog. I get her to this dog park and throw the ball around a couple of times to get her energy. And sure enough, it starts to mist down a little bit. And there's nobody else in this big ballpark. I take her to this little league ballpark because it's fenced in. She's not going to run away. And the only people there, off in the distance, is this couple dressed all in black. And in between them is this maybe an 8-year-old, girl. And it starts to mist, and they start walking towards their Jeep SUV. And as they're walking, they get in, and I throw the ball. I think I'll throw it a couple more times, and get home. And they turn on their headlights, and you could see the rain starting to get a little thicker. And it backs up, this Jeep, and then it stops. And then it pulls back in its space, and the headlights stay on. And this guy opens up the driver's door, and he's wearing black jeans, a black hoodie. He's got a black skull cap on and a beard. Bulky guy. And I put my shoulders back because I never know what this is going to be. I've driven around the country, and I just never know the kind of reaction I'm going to get from people. So you just want to be confident. At least a little bit. And this guy comes walking towards me, and he said, hey, he's out in the outfield, left outfield. Hey, I throw the ball again. It's a beautiful dog you got there. Thanks, appreciate it. He keeps on walking towards the fence. He said, why don't you come here for a second? I start walking towards him. I thought, oh man, where is this going? And he said, are you Jason Kutchma? And I said, yeah. And he said, what are you doing in Idaho? And I said, I live here. He said, where? I said, in Nampa. He said, you live in Nampa, Idaho? And I said, yes. And he said, God, this is so weird, but I've been following you on Instagram, taking pictures of your little tour that you were doing. And he said, I'm actually a big fan. I would see your pictures from Kansas where you played there, and you were doing these weird pop-up shows. And then I saw you were close to, play a couple shows in Colorado. And I told my wife, oh my God, he's going to be playing Idaho. Finally, I get to see this guy. He played Colorado, then he played Wyoming, and then nothing. And then all of a sudden you're playing Washington and Oregon. He said, you skipped over Idaho. Not that I blame you. And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I moved here for my allergy. He said, give me a break. I said, no, I really did. And he said, I can't believe this. We're not outdoors people. We just came to this park because we're babysitting. And we have no idea. We don't have kids. We have no ideas what kids like to do. And we're just a couple of, whatever. We thought, well, maybe, I don't know, kids like to go to green fields. And so we took her here, but, it starts to rain. And as we were in our car, I back up, and the girl that we were with said, oh my God, look how pretty that dog is. I have a very pretty dog. And my wife looked at the dog and says, yeah, that is a nice dog, but what kind of asshole wears white jeans with gold boots and spurs in Idaho in the winter? And he said, yeah, right. The only guy that I know is white jeans. He's got gold boots? And she said, yeah. And he said, I couldn't believe it. As soon as we were getting closer, I see your spurs. And he's a drummer. And weirdly enough, he's from Idaho. That's not weird, but weirdly and oddly enough, at some point he moved to Portland, and he was at a record store, and he found a used copy of one of Red Collar's albums, and he said for 9 months I couldn't wait I wanted to get back to Idaho, and I just kept on listening to this Red Collar's Welcome Home. And he said, then a bunch of your bands that are on your label, I'm fans of, and I ended up following your solo music. And I mean, a true godsend. I couldn't believe it. The chances of me going out that day and the chances of him meeting, I mean, Idaho's not a big state population-wise, and there's not many people, that would recognize me. Maybe only 3 people out of 1.8 million people, and that one happened to be in this dog park. But he's a great drummer. We had a project called Chasing 76. We have a project. It's just the 2 of us. It's more red collar than the 5/5 that I did with Tommy. But he's also a very good engineer. He's great at recording and having things sound like the way the thing should sound. And that's to me, very rare. You can find somebody that can do that great. And so we just recorded something, about 10 songs that we've been working on. The easiest album I've ever worked on in my life. It's just so easy. Some of the songs were 15 years old. Other ones were 15 minutes old. And it's not like, I don't know how to describe it. It's nothing unusual, but it does feel like me, how I would sound being, in a house during a pandemic. I don't think it sounds optimistic or pessimistic. It just sounds, great. I don't know. I'm really proud of it. And I can't believe how easy it was to do.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
The only time that those kind of moments really ever happen for me now, and they're equally as serendipitous, is having worked with Gabe at Runaway with the clothing business. We'll go, I'll travel all across the country and I'll run into people in airports or in coffee shops, anywhere, you name it, random, like we were talking about Montpelier, Vermont the other day.
Yeah.
Like, sure enough, I could walk the streets of Vermont and be wearing, either I would be wearing a shirt that says Durham on it, or somebody else would be wearing one. And it's like this, badge of honor, like just like this way that Durham has become this, this like thoroughfare almost, where people have either been here a long time and have recently moved, or come through here for whatever reason, Duke or whatever. And, but they have this like piece of Durham that I'm able to see from a distance, and like, I don't know this person, but I feel pretty good. We could like hang out or carry a conversation, whatever, based on this little, piece of memorabilia. And the Spurs, for you, all these years later, are still a way for people to identify you, and they have clearly like fond memories of you and what the Spurs symbolize and all that. So that's a really cool. I'm glad that experience happened for you, because I'm sure with the small population in Idaho, like you said, the chances of that thing happening is pretty small.
Yeah, and the Spurs are still functional. I still wear them on stage. I mean, it feels weird, very very strange when I don't wear them. As I mentioned about driving a stick, and I have a pair of tennis shoes that I switched into, and sometimes it's just convenient for that. And there have been times where I would drive this, with my wife, and she would go to a supermarket, and I'd just be next to her, and she'd say, "Stop sneaking up on me," because she's so used to like having this little cowbell around me that she could I'll never get lost in the mall,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and being gracious with your time.
Oh yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. Like I said, I think about particularly those moments where you all would come and practice at the house over on Anderson Street, and just like getting to come to shows. And, I had never really gone to live music much before that time in my life. And so to be able to connect with so many musicians then, and Tommy certainly has been a huge part of that, with all the music that he's played and bands he's been a part of. But I always just really appreciated our conversations and the wisdom that you've imparted on me, and just the good energy that you bring. So I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that. I'm sure a lot of people that'll hear this feel the same way.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. That's really great to hear. If there was one, and there have been many, but if there was one misstep, as we were talking, and we talked about my years as, a teacher, if there was a misstep with music, and this would be something I hope changes, but because music happens in these, even back then, it happened in places where you were able to take a chance. However, it wasn't a free-for-all. They still had to make some money, and so it was always affiliated with, alcohol. It's just a way to, to make some money. If there was a misstep that I wish we would have, the community would have been a little bit better at fostering. 305 South is very great for this, but you do have to encourage the teenagers, to do this, to get out and take a chance and to be on a stage, and to, it's great that I think people can make music in their bedrooms that sounds as good as if you were in most studios. But whenever you get on stage and, you deal with that nervous anxiety, it's fun. And we weren't always cognizant about that need. We got lucky with, Hammer No More the Fingers and with Duncan, that those guys were young whenever they started playing. They're Durham people, and there's a lot of people that knew them, that would come to shows. And if I really wished we would have been better at, it was trying to find some way to encourage, some after school program, just a place for kids to go, that maybe was, some artistic endeavors, they could just have fun or experiment or meet people. And, and that's where you really do work on bonds. That I still see people that are like, oh my God, what are you doing here? I haven't seen this person in 10 years, but we had that one moment, in that show or that we played together or whatever, that was really special. And I do fear that that's getting lost, that there is a transience, not just with Durham, but maybe America in general, that I worry that maybe those bonds that art can form, it just does become a moment, on a screen, as opposed to some real true, brick that you do build from. And I really wish that we would have, found a way to make a community space that was, Bull City headquarters, I think, it was very good about all ages, but you do have to reach out in some way. You do have to bring them in there. It might be a little weird having a 30-year-old somebody doing it, but eventually, if you can work on it, it does being like a ladder, where it's like a constant ladder that people are climbing on, and you don't have to encourage it as much.
That's a great call to action to end on. I think that's true more now than ever, with the way that space is changing and the way that people engage with one another through screens and not through screens. Having that sort of self-sufficiency in a scene where the next generation takes the mantle and continues to give back, that virtuous circle, it would be a way for us to continue growing Durham in a way that's very meaningful, clearly, to both of us and other folks that have experienced it over the years. Where can people find your music? Are you up on all the...
No, I'm actually not. I'm on Bandcamp and Bandcamp alone.
Great.
At some point I just wasn't comfortable with, all the other ones. And so it's just Bandcamp, and they're great. They're fair. And it's not like my nephew just asked me, why aren't you on Spotify? And I understand that it's not, I don't know. It's something that I can at least get behind for now. The other ones, I'm just not sure. It's not, I'm not necessarily down on them, but when it seems weird that, somebody, I have no idea what they pay. It's not that I think, oh, they pay terribly, but I don't know what they pay. And so I think for anybody out there, well, would you deal with that? Like if you had a boss, like, we love your work. We'd love for you to come into the office and share us with your talent. You're really talented. Great. How much are you going to pay me? Don't worry, we'll figure that out in the future. At some point, don't worry about it. How long would you go into the office until you demand to somebody tell you, this is exactly how much we're going to pay for exactly this amount of work? And that's it's this strange thing that hasn't been defined. So I don't, until it gets defined in terms that I think are, just, then I'm okay with Bandcamp's taking their percentage of it, and until that's figured out, I'm okay with that.
Great. And should people look for Jay Kutchma on Bandcamp? Should they look for Red Collar?
Yeah, Red Collar, Jay Kutchma and the 5/5. The Jay Kutchma is one word. And Chasing 76 is the band that I have in Idaho with Brandon, the drummer.
Cool. We'll make sure people get all those links in the show notes and everything. But again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, man.
It's always great to have you in time when we can. And I look forward to seeing you play in person again. I don't know when that will be. Maybe I'll have to be like this buddy of yours and just hop in my car and follow your tour. But I would love to experience that again soon, and I'm sure other people feel that way too. But make sure you go get Jay's music on his Bandcamp, support your independent artists, and we'll talk to y'all again soon. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, man.
You said that you love me.